All right, welcome to our lunch study break. Today is February 24th. It is Wednesday. Purim begins tomorrow night. And what I wanted to do for this lunch study break, I mentioned that my wife thinks I should rename this lunch study break to complicate matters, because it seems to be that what I do quite frequently in this lunch study break is I throw wrenches and I throw complications into our narratives around our holidays or around ritual. And hopefully in the process, I see Ellen's got two thumbs up. I like that. And hopefully in the process of complicating the matters, we deepen it. Sometimes it's challenging to complicate the matters. And I just want to reaffirm that all ideas are on the table here. All thoughts are welcome. The only thing that is required is politeness. We have to be polite to each other. And when thinking about what I wanted to teach for Purim and how to complicate matters, I really wanted to focus in on feminist interpretations. That was really wanted to dig into some feminist interpretations of Purim. It's a very female-centric holiday, and one that has a wonderful heroine at the heart of it. And there's also been a whole bunch of overlaying, perhaps not female positive overlay that has been given over time to the story. And I wanted to see if I could scrape that out and see if we could look at some feminists' interpretations. And as I was going through some of them, some are better than others. Some are great interpretations, just like any other group of interpretations. There are going to be some good ones, there are going to be some bad ones. And then I found one really interesting one, which was a review of a number of the modern feminist interpretations, which was actually pretty concise and takes us through a number of the authors that I had been reading up on. So we're gonna use that today as our template to talk about Purim. But I want to tell you first, it's from commentary, and it has a critical point of view with regard to these feminist interpretations. So, but it's also written by a woman, of course. And so I just want to say that the take of the narrator, the author of the article, we should use that to spur a conversation about the interesting things that she's bringing up and how we've experienced in our own lives. But we're certainly welcome, as always, to disagree. But I just wanted to give that as a preface, because I'm not seeking to tear down feminist narratives. I'm actually seeking to dig into them a little bit. And I think that by doing the pros and the cons, we can actually have a very wonderful, deep narrative that affirms femininity and the role of our heroine, Esther. Okay, that was a 4-minute preamble. Let me now go to the text. So first of all, let's talk about the holiday of Purim and Megillat Esther. Was it last year? Boy, it's hard to even remember last year. Every year I've been doing one of these sessions in which I will read through the Megillah of Esther. And that's not, do you guys see it? There you go. You guys have Esther now on the screen, right? I'll read through the Megillah of Esther, and what we'll do is we'll look at the role of Vashti. I'm going to guess that everybody here, this isn't a one-on-one class. We know the story. Vashti refuses to dance before the king. She gets tossed aside. Mordechai is the foster parent for his cousin Esther, who is an orphan. She's very beautiful. He suggests that she compete in the contest to become the queen after Vashti. She wins the contest, but she wins it only because she keeps her Jewish identity secret. And then in order for Esther to save all of her people from the wicked Haman, who is just furious that Mordechai will not bow down to him, she has to reveal her own identity as a Jew and save the Jewish people. That's 60 seconds of Megillat Esther. Okay, so lots of stuff going on here. Let me just begin, before I get into some of the feminist retellings and complicate the matters. Let's just talk about it in broad strokes. I see a number of people here grew up in Beth Sholom. Jessica grew up in Beth Sholom. Sandy grew up in Beth Sholom. So it's like, for people who grew up in a Jewish context, and I'm interested in hearing from the women, I guess, first here. Tell me about tell me about Esther, just as a child or as a young woman, as coming of age. I mean, what did you think of her as a character? And if you want to share a little bit about Vashti, please do. That would be putting the women here on the spot. Any women would like to go first would be great.
Well, when I was growing up at Beth Sholom, it was all about the beauty contest. So
yeah, tell me about that. Good.
Well, we used to do, they used to have beauty contests and we all participated.
Shush. What did you wear? Wait, what did people wear? And we did this at the shul?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was part of the play. I mean, I guess we did the whole play, but it's the beauty contests that stick out because I was no beauty. but I mean, that was so much of the focus, and Vashti wasn't even part of it. And it wasn't until I became more of an adult. I don't even know when the whole Vashti.
Did you have fun? So this left you with the negative taste in your mouth about this? I mean, that couldn't have, you couldn't have loved that experience. I would have hated that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so that was.
And what did you think of Esther? Did you have an affinity for Esther or not so much?
Well, yeah, she did save the Jews, so that was always like part of it.
Right on. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other years older than Jessica.
So Jessica, when you were growing up in Beth Sholom, what was it like?
I don't believe we had beauty contests.
That's positive.
Yes, I have some vivid memories of the Purim spiel. I was narrator at least once, which was Susan sent me a video of the Purim spiel in '99. Ooh, I'm probably in that. Yes, I'm there. At 10. Yeah, I remember one that we had a string of years that they would be like tailored to something sort of more commercial. Like I remember there was a Mother Goose one that like the entire Purim spiel was sort of like overlaid in a Mother Goose style. We maybe did a Dr. Seuss one. I don't know, but it was always fun. And obviously the Purim Carnival was huge in the Friedman Center, and the crepe and the, my family was always very involved in that with the prep. And
did you get to the end in which we murdered 75,000 people? Did you guys focus on that part?
That does not ring a bell.
So we leave that part out mostly.
I mean, my Hebrew name is Esther, so I'm like familiar with the story of Esther a bunch. And that sort of like part 2 that was talked about in the article didn't super hit me as I didn't remember it all that well. And I sort of felt like the criticisms around Vashti versus Esther and what we're taking from each, I mean, we can get into the article, but I think as a kid, there was,
none of that, right? None of that.
I don't know about none of that. I think there was a emphasis on like villainizing one or the other. And I don't think we were like forced into that either or.
Gotcha. Thank you. Susan?
I don't think we should be.
Yes, I was just going to say that was my son's memory of, other than being in the Purim spiel, was Tila feeding them snacks to get them through the rehearsals. Yeah, it was different. I think
different time. Yeah. What about you, Ellen?
At my Reformed congregation in New Orleans, we had a Purim party every year, and the kids all came in costume, and there were lots of Queen Esthers. And they showed the film Alice in Wonderland. For some reason, every Purim, don't ask me, I have no idea why. And some of the costumes, we were in New Orleans, were just totally secular, like this guy who wore things from all different sports, like a football jersey and a baseball cap, and there was a bakery in New Orleans called Long's, and they made the most wonderful Hamantaschen, which were about this big each. And I crave them to this day.
I'm craving them at the moment. Thank you, Ellen. Okay, so I think we're seeing here just a quick background is how we're exposed to this book and to this holiday, and it's an unusual sort of celebration, inversion of the traditional tale. Like a lot of Jewish stories, the old joke is a lot of the Jewish stories is they were out to get us, they wanted to kill all of us, we survived, let's eat. Here, there is an inversion where everyone is out to kill us, and then we turn the tables. I just want to tell you, I met with our post-B'nai Mitzvah kids, and I wanted to really drill down and give them a different perspective. And none of them had seen Tarantino. So rest assured, none of our 15-year-olds have yet to see Tarantino. But there's a wonderful movie called Inglourious Bastards, which I often compare to this book because it's a revenge fantasy. It is taking something that is completely horrific and turning it on its head and imagining that we can go out and exact that revenge. And I explained to the children, the students, 15-year-olds, I explained to them that having an outlet, especially for an oppressed people, to imagine one day out of the year that we can, take power and go after in a vengeful way it's a little bit of an exhaust valve. It's hard to be an oppressed people and to have a little bit of an exhaust valve and a little play acting of when we're in charge now, can be very healthy, as opposed to we don't want to ever allow ourselves to acknowledge the fact that sometimes we want to kill our oppressors. To deny that is perhaps to deny an aspect of our reality. We don't want to indulge in that, but to have a date on the calendar in which we can acknowledge that some of us might have those feelings, we can direct those sort of revenge fantasies into this particular narrative, and that's our day, perhaps healthier than pretending that we don't ever think that way, which would be perhaps untrue. So let's open up in this piece here. Hold on, let me scroll to the top here. It's in commentary. The problem with Purim, creating a more politically correct holiday. So as we mentioned, from the beauty pageants and from the murder and all the killing, there are politically correct problems with this story. They offend a lot of our political correct sensibilities, and they're some of them are pretty offensive. So Abby Schachter, about 10 years ago, said that by creating a more politically correct holiday means promoting a new heroine and downgrading a more traditional one. Judah wants to ask before we get into this.
Yeah, I felt like when you first mentioned commentary, you kind of inferred something. And I mean, commentary must be really old, because I remember my aunt and uncle reading it, and they were more intellectual than my parents. I'm not familiar with commentary today. There's
a more conservative bent, is what I would say. Commentary it reminds me of the old joke from Annie Hall. They read commentary and dissent. I heard they merged. They're now dysentery. Is the old joke from Woody Allen's Annie Hall. So commentary is slightly to the right. And I guess why I wanted to do that preface is because I'm not seeking to be critical of these feminist narratives. She might be, and she has a point with how we can move too far in our desire to be politically correct. So go right ahead, Judah.
One thing in the article, which I'm glad you shared, I really enjoyed reading it, though, that they said that that the holiday has allowed cross-dressing for years in the Jewish community, and I don't think that's true. I mean, there's dressing, but I don't ever recall or thinking that it would be condone cross-dressing.
There is the old
to an Orthodox one. In Orthodox, it's very common to cross-dress. In Orthodox and Hasidim all the time.
I did not know that. All right, thank you.
I mean, it's the ultimate turning things upside down, and I think that's where Alice in Wonderland comes in too. I mean, it's the ultimate turning things upside down.
Very good. Okay, so let's go into Abby Schachter, because she's gonna, I think, begin to throw some shade on some of these connections that we make. So she talks, just a preface here, the liturgy and the observances of the Jewish religious calendar have been set in place for many centuries. Okay, we know this, Seders and Hanukkah. But it is the holiday of Purim that has undergone the most thorough makeover by a new generation of liberal and feminist thinkers. For 3 decades, an effort has been underway to change not so much the observance of the holiday, but the meaning of Purim itself. This is a celebration, as we talked about, Hafochu, the reversal of fortune, the deliverance of the Jews from Persia from a massacre, has been transmogrified into a feminist holiday that also calls into question the entire concept of Jewish self-defense, which is at the heart of the story's rather gruesome conclusion. Unfortunately, this effort to modernize the Purim story lionizes the wrong woman, promotes a false political message of nonviolence and tolerance, and worst of all, embraces failure instead of promoting the greatest of all Jewish heroines. Okay, so she obviously disagrees with how we have been reinterpreting this story. Okay, so then she shares a little bit of the Book of Esther. We've discussed all of this. We know the story. Let me scroll down. She writes here, Purim is the Jewish carnival, a day on which the consumption of alcohol is traditionally encouraged and the prohibitions against cross-dressing, here we go, Gary, are removed amid the revelry that celebrates the heroes of the story. It is also the quintessential diaspora festival, as its narrative emphasizes the plight of a Jewish community whose security depends on the goodwill of non-Jewish sovereigns. The decision of Queen Esther, who is a hidden Jew, to come out of the closet turns the table on her peace prosecutors, setting the stage for a massive score settling in which those who plan to murder the Jews are instead the ones who are killed. All right. Yet in recent years, she writes, Purim has come under criticism from some Jewish thinkers, in large measure because of the bloodiness of the triumph at its conclusion. Right? The Jews are killing 75,000 Persians in a single day, and he quotes Professor Elliot Horowitz from Bar-Ilan University, who devoted his entire book to the questionable claim that Purim has long been the occasion for outbreaks of Jewish animosity and even violence towards Christians. Horowitz based this bizarre thesis largely on the fact that Baruch Goldstein's massacre in Hebron occurred on Purim. In his review for the book, for the commentary, Hillel Hankin pointed out the incidents of Jewish violence against non-Jews are so few in number that to make any connection between the holiday of Purim is a bit much. Okay. All right. So previous generations of persecuted Jews may have, sort of my Inglorious Bastard story, may have viewed the expression of joy and the triumph of the Jews at Persia at the expense of their would-be exterminator and his accomplices as a delicious revenge fantasy. That's how I've always viewed it. But from the vantage point of the late 20th and early 21st centuries, the aspects of Purim that seem to embody a triumphalist spirit of Jewish power are unnerving to those who are more comfortable with the Jewish history of the Jewish people that dwells almost exclusively on the story of their suffering. All right, I'm going to keep going here unless there are any commentary. Now she's going to take a few elements. Of all the elements of this process by which the Purim story has been deconstructed, none is as curious as the way the relatively minor character has been both reimagined and glorified, Queen Vashti. Now we know the story of Queen Vashti, and she writes here, feminists have not merely reinterpreted her actions and her character, they have used her as the entry point for a new narrative that would turn Purim from a festival of Jewish victory into a celebration of a singular brand of feminist ideology and the negation of a strong, politically savvy Jewish princess who uses feminine wiles rather than passive resistance to achieve her aims. Jewish children are now encouraged to recognize Queen Vashti for her supposed courage in standing up to King Ahasuerus and view her as a positive role model. Feminists see Vashti's failure as the height of female power. At the same time, they seem to need to denigrate Esther's formidable achievements in order to raise up Vashti. They choose the non-Jew over the Jew and the failure over the success. 30 years ago, in an article entitled The Restoration of Vashti, Mary Gendler wrote this: Achashverosh can be seen not only as the ultimate authority who holds vast power over everyone, but more generally as male patriarchal authority in relation to females. As such, Vashti and Esther serve as models of how to deal with such authority. And the message comes through loud and clear. Women who are bold, direct, aggressive, and disobedient are not acceptable. The praiseworthy women are those who are unassuming, quietly persistent, and who gain their power through the love they inspire in men. These women live almost vicariously, subordinating their needs and their desires to those of others. We only have to look at the stereotyped Jewish mother to attest to the still pervasive influence of the Esther behavioral model. Okay, so Mary Gendler, I'm curious to know. I mentioned I really like this article. I don't have any problem. I mean, I appreciate Abby's perspective. I'm not saying I agree with it. I appreciate it as part of discourse, but I really love all of how she has all of these different inserts that really allow us to view all of these different thinkers. So Ellen.
Have you seen this new book, My Comfy Pants? Oh, no. It's a wonderful Jewish story in rhyme about Queen Vashti. And you have got to see it. You just absolutely have to read. It's wonderful.
And it glorifies Vashti.
Yes.
For the reasons this woman is suggesting, for those reasons. What are your feelings on that sort of interpretation of sort of lifting Vashti and Esther up, making them of the same kind, if you will?
I don't think they were of the same kind necessarily, but I think they were both very courageous women in the time in which they lived.
Do you think that there is something to well, she'll get to that. Why are we more comfortable validating Vashti than we are validating Esther? That seems to be what she's pointing out here. There's something about Vashti's failure that is appealing to our Jewish sense, that the triumphalist narrative of Esther is, because it's an inversion of our normal narrative, it bothers us on some level. Jessica.
I think the Vashti narrative is cleaner. It's shorter. There's less of it to knock around and poke holes in. And I think the feeling that kept coming through me as I read this was like, why do we have to choose one? It's not resistance or, conversation, manipulation, whatever. Like, you use the tools you have when you need to use them. And sometimes the ask is like so egregious that you say, hell no, regardless of the consequences. And sometimes you work within the system to try and get what you want. And I just kept being like, why do we have to pit these women against each other? Which, like, boy, do we love to do that in culture.
Well, no, I think that's great. And maybe that's part of a really healthy criticism of the Megillah in the first place, which is, it's tapping into these bad narratives around women who are fighting with each other. It's like it's tapping into this, beauty pageant, catfight thing that is just further misogynistic, further evidence of misogyny inherent in the book. Yeah, maybe. Okay. Yeah. Ellen, you again. Yes, Ellen, go.
The only thing I wanted to say is that it is so interesting to see how we view these stories in light of our times. And for those of us who are of a certain age, who remember the 1950s stay-at-home housewife who was very active in Hadassah and Council of Jewish Women, Vashti was just not a good person at all. And today we can go back and reread that story. And I think that experience should make us very mindful as we read any of this material, that we read it through the eyes of the time in which we live.
I think that's I think that's right. And in an effort to really craft a nice, strong, wonderful narrative, I think one of the points that Schachter is making here is that we're doing a little disservice to the text itself. So let's go on to another read. 20 years later, the spring of 1998 issue of Lilith magazine included a special section on Purim. And in that, Rabbi Susan Schnur wrote with exasperation, "Why aren't we insisting that our synagogue communities cheer and stomp their feet at the mention of Vashti's name? She is the foremother in the best sense of the word, assertive, appropriate, and courageous." So this is a remarkable change, as Ellen is noting, from the traditional rabbinic thinking about Vashti, which attempted, as a lot of Jewish wisdom does, to besmirch minor characters who don't fit into the category they want, to besmirch their reputation in order to make Esther appear even more heroic. We've discussed this. We want to make Esau look bad, so Jacob looks better. We want to make Ishmael look bad, so Yitzchak looks better. And similarly, let's just continue. We want to make Vashti look bad, so Esther looks better. In fact, according to the Midrash, Vashti, and here's where you're getting at. Vashti was the great granddaughter of King Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon, the destroyer of Judaism. In the view of the rabbis, Vashti was not only a licentious person who behaved inappropriately, but also a vicious creature that beat her Jewish handmaidens, stripped them naked, and forced them to work on Shabbat. Whether or not this villainous portrait is as unjustified as the current take on Vashti, painting her in this light allows us to see her punishment as merited. So that's it. That's going to be the traditional take. And instead, Rabbi Schnur says that the Megillah's account of Queen Vashti losing her station for refusing to appear naked in front of her husband was reworked from an ancient pagan celebration, to the words of Rabbi Schnur, to an autonomous women's rights that could not be reined in by men. Thus, according to Schnur, the first two chapters of the book of Esther represent one of Purim's main core reversals. That is, they represent a male revolt against women. Vashti, Schnur writes, is the one who is not afraid to be assertive, not afraid to displease the males. But more than just killing off this upstart woman, she writes, the Megillah kills off not only Vashti, but the whole cycle, death, rotting, rebirth, the whole awakening and empowering experience. It is a deliberate theft, humiliation. She doesn't get to reemerge as a woman. Okay, thoughts on Rabbi Schnur's interpretation of Vashti in the text here? I think there's a lot of good stuff in it. I think there's a lot of good stuff. I think the author might be I'm not sure about the tone of the way that this is written, but I think I think there's a lot that we can learn about the status of women and through Vashti's behavior and the patriarchal dominance of a particular society that comes through in this text. I think we can validate that without having to maybe raise up some characters that might not be worth raising up. But I mean, just because the Midrash says that she was a terrible person who made her Jews work on Shabbat, we don't know that to be the case. That's just the rabbi's negative overlay onto the text itself. Anyway, I'm curious, does the rabbi here, Schnur, resonate with anybody? Some people?
It resonates with me.
Yeah, tell me, Sandy.
So was she really the descendant of Nebuchadnezzar?
No, it's just Midrash. It's Midrash. Yeah. It's all Midrash.
Right.
It's the same way the rabbis want Esau to look bad. They want Vashti to look bad because then it makes Esther look better.
Well, yeah, but they don't. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, I'm agreeing with Rabbi Schnur, and it was part of my, Lilith magazine was part of my awakening about some of this stuff.
Yeah, so tell me more about that, because my concern with bringing this piece as the template to have this conversation was that it would be framed in too much of a critical way. Tell me about your awakening in Lilith magazine.
Well, I don't remember exactly how it happened with Lilith, but you know, I would read it pretty regularly. I was going to say religiously, but anyway. And I mean, the whole idea of Vashti, and I don't remember reading this particular article, but they long since talked about Vashti as that she was right to not dance naked. And, you know, maybe if she was Nebuchadnezzar's granddaughter, she could get away with it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd listening to you talk, the more the argument makes sense to me, because we go out of our way to validate Jethro, right? We have non-Jewish, non-Israelite characters throughout the Tanakh that our Midrash has no problem
Right.
saying lovely things about.
Right.
Gary, were you raising your hand there?
Yeah. Since you like bomb throwing and you haven't been doing much bomb throwing, I'm going to really go out on a limb and bomb throw here.
Go right ahead. I'm happy to mute myself.
You know, I go week after week, I hear Marilyn and Ernie complain about the use of Midrash and how it can create all these weird narratives. And we love doing this to take what our text is and bring it in contemporary settings. And to me, that's fine, but you got to take it you got to both complement it with the context and bring it into the new. And to talk about Purim without talking about Shabbat Zachor, which precedes it, and which the mitzvah is incumbent on, especially in traditional communities, of every man and every woman must hear Shabbat Zachor, where it says, blot out the Amalekites, do not forget and blot them out. And we go to then Purim right afterwards, and we hear Mordechai and Esther, who we hold up today as the ultimate in Jewish names and Jews. Well, in Persia, they're assimilated. Mordechai's name is thought to come from Morduk. Morduk was the one. Ishtar for Esther. So they were totally assimilated, and they'd forgotten their Judaism. And to the point where he convinces her to marry out. There's no threat at this point. He convinces her to marry the king and marry out. So what does this say when taken in the context of something like Zachor? Is it saying that, you know, we can assimilate it's an uncomfortable thing for us here in these times where we're fairly assimilated, but does it say we can assimilate out but never escape? And we always got to remember, go back to Torah, and until we Jews have power, we're going to forever be vulnerable.
That's news? Is that
how do you like that?
But is that news? I mean, isn't that the Jewish story?
Well, I mean, but maybe that's the story of Purim that we never talk about, that we like to talk about, you know, light onto the nations, and we're going to lead that way, but that we forget about the killing at the end of Purim.
That's right.
And that until Jews have power to control our own destinies, you know, we're going to assimilate and disappear. And it's every time when they rise up, we have to rise up and kill them to do it. I mean, let me give you another friend. I think that's right. And I was once having this conversation about Middle East politics. Never a good idea to have a conversation about Middle East politics. And it was at the Kiddush here at Beth Sholom. And I said, look, I have to tell you, I just draw the line on small children being killed. I said, that's just my line in general. If small children are getting killed or murdered, that's, for me, and the person said to me, well, I spent years in Germany dreaming of killing Hitler Youth, so that's not a problem for me. That's what the gentleman said back to me. So that's what Gary wants us to appreciate. Like, we're coming from that. And Gary says, if we ignore that, then we're losing the whole story. Right, Gary? And Zachor says that, they came and attacked the weak, the children, and the stragglers, not the front. It was the warriors. I mean,
but we don't, we're uncomfortable with our use of power. We're uncomfortable with triumphalist narratives, and we like being the lovable loser. We do. We really like being the lovable. I think there is something to that. By the way, speaking of which, someone who liked the last chapter, Rabbi Meir Kahana, he really liked the last chapter. of Megillat Esther. He used to say, I would rather be a small state hated by the whole world than an Auschwitz loved by it. And that's Gary's point. That's Gary's point. Jessica.
Yeah, I just wonder if I agree that we sort of are taking these stories into a modern context. So with that in mind, shouldn't we also include the modern context of like wiping out your foes is not really the way anymore?
But we're not allowed to add or subtract from Torah, and that's word for word in Torah the week before Purim. That's the last thing we read in Torah is remember and wipe them out. That's the last
well,
thing.
there is really evil. There is.
And to emphasize that Haman is considered to be the descendant of the Amalekites, so they weren't wiped out. So, I mean, it's hard to have this discussion unless you can bring it into a modern context. But you have to.
There is an internal enemy. That's right. Sorry, I'm getting a little feedback here. There's an internal enemy of the Jewish people that is represented in the figure of Amalek. Haman is a descendant of Amalek. Adolf Hitler is a descendant of Amalek, and living currently amongst us is a descendant of Amalek. And we are woefully naive of Jewish history unless we acknowledge that. Ben.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of arguments being made here. It might help to kind of tease them apart a little bit, because I think some may be well argued and some I think are reactionary nonsense. So it reminds me. By the
way, that's commentary, by the way. Who was asking me about commentary? There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. So it reminds me a lot of, there used to be sort of arguments around the Merchant of Venice and the ways in which certain directors would try to turn it into a, philo-Semitic work, right? And turn Shylock into the hero and Portia into the villain, and hence getting it completely backwards, right? But in an effort to make it square with our sensibilities. And I think that's what the author is doing here, is the argument she's trying to make, is that we're trying to do that to the story of Esther, right? And I think she's wrong. First of all, I think this idea that we're, that it is commonplace to elevate Vashti above Esther is a straw man. I don't see that almost anywhere, right? I think there has been an effort to rehabilitate Vashti a little bit, right? And to see the ways in which she is a real character, right? And to give her the status of a real character rather than just a prop. But I don't see, maybe on the far feminist fringe, there are those staging Purim spiels where Esther is the villain and Vashti is the hero, but I've never seen such a thing.
But there is validity. There is validity in the strength. I buy the feminist narrative around Vashti and her strength. That right. I do find appealing. That's not doing damage.
And Shakta seems to be saying that is destructive of the narrative. Right? In a way that I don't think is true. Now, I do think she has a point when we do consider aspects of the story of the slaughter, right? That takes place, perpetrated by the Jews in the story, that we do tend to gloss over or ignore or skip entirely.
Yep.
I'm more sympathetic to a view that there is something there that bears looking into, and that maybe that is a really crucial part of the story that we have to get our heads around rather than just, wave away, right? But I generally, I think the thrust of her argument here is that feminism is stay with this point, because
I do think there is some remez, some hint of truth here when she says we are just frankly more comfortable with Vashti's assertion of power than with Esther's. We are uncomfortable with her use of her femininity and her sexuality for the purpose of exerting power, and therefore we want a different heroine, and so we pop over to Vashti.
That's who.
I think we're uncomfortable with the way in which her power is totally
Says this woman here.
mediated.
We'll get there. Yeah.
She doesn't really, I mean, Esther has very limited power in this story, right? Mordecai tells her what to do, and then she has to go to the king, and the king has to kind of make things happen. She has pretty much no direct authority or power in this story. And yeah,
except to walk through the
Vashti,
door. Except she has to walk through the door unannounced. That's her quintessential breaking away from orders.
Right.
But no, her quintessential breaking away from orders, she's not been called upon. She has not been called upon, and she's going in. And that's going to cost her life, maybe.
But she has to operate within the patriarchy, right? She has to, in order to accomplish what she wants to accomplish. And Vashti opts out of the patriarchy essentially altogether. And yes, I think there's a point that we're more comfortable with the idea of just not wanting to have anything to do with it, rather than operating within it. Yeah, I think that's fair.
I do this every year. I love to drill down on the sexuality of the story, and we never seem to ever want to discuss it. Ellen.
I'm really very comfortable with Esther's feminine wiles.
Is that what I said? Oi, gefault.
I have great admiration for how she managed this situation. And I think you really can't hold her up against Vashti, who had no options like that whatsoever, and who was dealing with this crazy drunk guy.
Yes, yes, she was. Yes, she was. And I just wish there was more to her story than what we have. Oh yeah, Jessica, go right ahead.
I just want to make the quick point in response to Ben and Ellen that Vashti didn't abdicate her opportunity to make change for the Jews. That wasn't part of her. I think it's wrong to say Esther, made change and Vashti decided to opt out, because Vashti opted out of the party and then was out of the kingdom. So she wasn't in an opportunity to affect the Haman stuff.
Yeah, Sandy.
So is it true, or is it midrash, that after Esther tells Ahasuerus what Haman is doing, he leaves the room, and then when he comes back, Haman is on top of Esther, and that
begging for his life. Yes, right. He's begging for. It's like a Three's Company episode. Every Three's Company episode is based upon some mishearing of somebody walks in at the wrong time. They think the wrong thing. It's a sexual innuendo, and it was really someone fixing the plumbing. That's how I've always interpreted that scene.
Well, so you don't think that Ahasuerus killed Haman because he thought he was engaging with Esther sexually?
Well, that's how it looked. I think the text leads it to Esther, very naturally, to give Ahasuerus a little bit more oomph to slaughter Haman, for sure.
But so it could have been that instead of Esther's convincing him that Haman was responsible for killing the Jews.
Yeah, maybe he had no great affinity for Jews anyway. It was just this guy is not going to touch. But he does let the Jews go wild and kill a lot of people too. So he does allow them to do that. Okay, so let's move ahead. Let's move ahead a little bit here. Schneur's Purim expose isn't focused exclusively on Vashti. She has strong words for Queen Esther, who she compares unfavorably to a pagan deity. Unlike, here you go, Ben. My headbuds are about to run out of battery. Okay. All right, can everybody hear me? Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
So unlike the goddess Ishtar, who has power in her own right, just like a male god, the less ancient Esther can only intercede with the king, but has no power for herself. So while Vashti was positively defiant, Esther was supposedly powerless. which is, by the way, kind of what we've been discussing. But again, the original text isn't as bad as the rabbinic interpretation. Okay, that's her overlay. This is Rabbi Schnur. Most creepy of all, though, is the rabbi's lewd, peeping, Thomish interest in exactly how Esther is beautiful. In the Midrash, they literally quantify, it's like a face mask, and rank her beauty vis-a-vis other Jewish women. And descriptions of the exact quality of Esther's sexual appeal take up many pages. The rabbis sound remarkably like those classical fathers of anorexic girls who feel compelled to comment on their daughters. You've gained weight at college, or your roommate's a knockout. These contemporary Esthers, as we know, get their sad revenge. And, I know that the author here is making fun of that, but I mean, that's a reality for a lot of women growing up in this society. It's just, you can make fun of it, but it's just the truth. I have a daughter who's 9, and she also, it's just a part of society, and to pretend that that isn't a part of society. I asked what were people's impressions or memories of Passover, and one of them said, Sandy said, well, we had a beauty contest for the girls. My God. As Schnur concludes, our themes as contemporary women are the same: to restore something that has been separated, to reconnect the body and soul, to reunite Vashti and Esther, to integrate and reclaim the feminine that has been lost or abandoned in human history. The part of Esther they want to reclaim seems unclear. However, they love Vashti because she is defiant, but neither Gendler nor the Lilith fighters see the queen as powerful. Esther should be embraced in the spirit of wholeness, but her own attributes and choices are not to be emulated. Indeed, they have little to say about Esther's actions or her ultimate success. And by turning Vashti into a positive icon, they are elevating defiance per se to the highest level. The fact that Esther chooses a difficult path, that she does so with little help of success and with death nearly certain, and that she does all of this for her people rather than herself, is not of the least concern to this early generation of Purim feminists. Okay, well, that's strong language here. Anybody want to argue or respond? I think Ben is right. It really, the more we read, the more strawman-esque this article appears.
Something interesting, I was driven by what Ben had to say to see what popularity in naming has to do, and I Googled it. In 1904, there were 8,000 Esthers per million babies born, and that was a constant rate of decline until the turn of, till the last 25 years, where it's been constant at 900. Vashti peaked at the same time in 1900 at 76 per million. By 2000, it was down to essentially 0, and it's been a straight line up since then to now it's at 26 per million. So still a lot less popular, but from being 0 for years, it all of a sudden skyrocketed in the last 10 years. So that's interesting.
So there you go. Jessica has a wonderful comment. I encourage people to read. We've been doing diversity, equity, and inclusion sessions here at Beth Sholom, a part of a grant that we won. And I really like that you put the privilege of prettiness. I've been trying to sort this out myself. If we're going, if certain people have privileges based upon their physical attributes, I know of a whole bunch of people who had a lot of privileges because they were much better looking than I was, or a whole bunch of women who are much better looking than the majority are, who have a certain amount of privilege. So how do we negotiate that in diversity, equity, and inclusion? Pretty privilege. And I have no idea how to sort that out. Jessica.
I'd say it sort of further complicates the conversation around Vashti versus Esther, which I still said does not need to be a versus, that raising up the Esther conversation gets messier faster because using your feminine wiles is not a equitably distributed tool.
Oh, okay. All right. That's very interesting. Very good. Thank you. Ben.
I just have a quick question, which is, and something I never really thought about before. What would Esther do if she were asked to do the same thing that Vashti was asked to do? We never get to see that. So we assume there would, do we assume there would be a different result?
I don't
And if
know.
so, what?
Ask the class.
Yeah.
Anybody? Another bucket. Yeah, Jessica. Sorry.
I just don't think we have insights into her. It's a big what if that I think she's like, the part of the story that we do see is her using her beauty for an end goal of saving her people at the direction of her uncle. And we do not see her in a situation to use her body for her drunk husband's enjoyment and his friends.
Right, but I guess what I'm asking is if what Vashti did was wrong, then what would have been right?
Which part of what Vashti did was wrong?
Well, I mean, Shakta seems to be leading us toward an idea that Vashti is somehow the villain of this story. If not the villain, at least in no ways, meritorious, right? But what are we to imagine she did wrong?
I don't think she did anything wrong. I think what this author keeps trying to insist on is that one has to be the villain and one has to be the hero. But I think that the beginning of the story, which deals with Vashti, and then she goes away, the way she acts, I think, is an interesting look, and why it's become a part of feminist conversation to say, look at this biblical figure who said no in a time where women couldn't say no very often. And then the story transitions to Esther. I don't think we need to pit them against each other.
Ben, your question leads me into something about storytelling and the way stories are told. And this author says, Vashti's only mentioned very briefly, so therefore she can't be very important. And that's true in most of the way Western storytelling goes. You have a protagonist and they carry on through there. If you've ever seen a Russian opera, it's totally different from Western opera. The person comes up, sings one aria, and then dies or is never heard from again. And so just because they only get one chance and one voice doesn't mean they're not important. It's just a different way of telling stories.
Well, and if biblical interpretation isn't about, teasing out in great detail things that take up very little time in the text, then I don't know what it is about.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, my least favorite character in this story is Uncle Morty, who there's just something about him. Even if you view him in the most favorable way, he doesn't come out looking great.
He's saying he's a pimp?
Well, I'm going to show a video. Let me show a video. It's in Hebrew, but there's English subtitles. So watch this, and then I'm curious to get your reaction.
ויהי בימי אחשוורוש, איש יהודי היה בשושן הבירה, ושמו מרדכי. ויהי אומן את אסתר בת דודו, והנערה יפת תואר וטובת מראה.
יש! אסתר? אסתר?
קראת לי, דודי?
אסתר?
כן.
מצאתי פתרון לבעיה שלנו. נכון שאחשוורוש רוצה להשמיד אותנו.
נכון.
ונכון שאחשוורוש לא כל כך מרוצה מבשתי בזמן האחרון.
נו.
אז ככה, את הולכת לארמון, עושה לאחשוורוש קצת חנדלח, קצת פוצי מוצי, והופ, אחשוורוש לא רוצה להשמיד אותנו.
אוקיי, אחלה רעיון, אבל זה לא נראה לך קצת בעייתי לשלוח אותי לאחשוורוש. זה קצת עושה אותי...
קצת מה?
זונה?
איך זונה?
כאילו, שלא תחשוב, זה רעיון טוב, אבל זה קצת מוציא אותי, אתה יודע, זונה.
איך זונה?
טוב, אולי לא הבנתי. אתה רוצה שאני אהיה עם אחשוורוש?
כן.
וקצת פוצי מוצי?
להציל את העם.
נו, אז זה כמו זונה.
לא, זה לא כמו זונה.
זה לא כמו זונה, זה זונה.
זה לא זונה.
זה כן זונה.
זה לא זונה.
זה כן זונה.
איך זה זונה?
איך זה לא זונה? אתה שולח אותי להיות עם גבר זר?
כן.
לך יוצא מזה משהו?
בוודאי, אני מציל את עצמי ממוות.
נו, אז זונה.
רגע אחד, אסתר.
זונה.
אסתר?
זונה.
אסתר. שנייה.
אתה רוצה שאני אהיה זונה?
לא זונה.
זה זונה?
אני יכול להגיד מילה?
המילה הזאת זה זונה?
לא.
אז לא.
אסתר, תביני טוב טוב, אם התוכנית שלנו תצליח, העם שלנו יכיר לך תודה, יכתבו עלייך שירים, יכניסו אותך לתנ"ך.
וואלה יופי, דוד המלך, ירמיהו הנביא ואסתר הזונה, אחלה.
לא זונה, מלכה.
מלכה של זונות.
לא זונה, תפו חס וחלילה זונה. את תהיי המושיעה של העם שלנו. הסיפור שלך יחיה לנצח, יהיה חג על שמך. חג של שמחה, וילדות קטנות יחכו כל השנה לחג הזה, כדי להתחפש לאסתר.
אז הם התחפשו לזונות?
רק בתיכון.
Isn't that great? And that's it. I mean, there it is. Wait, so thoughts, commentary. Anybody want to say anything? Feedback. That's pretty good there, right? It really gets to the heart of the whole issue. What I like about that, that's a humorous Israeli television show, obviously. What I like about it is the actor who plays Mordechai is so sincere. But you'll be a hero to the Jewish people. You will have saved us all. You'll be in the Tanakh. And it's just, it really gets to, I think, some of the discomfort that we see about it that is not historically seen by men.
Actually, I like that he says that they'll name a holiday for you, except the holiday isn't named Esther.
All right, we have a few more minutes, so I'm going to keep going a little bit. So let's go back. All right, so here we go. And so it's here. The point is that this, she goes on, it's not limited to what you might merely think are the more liberal branches of, oh, actually, no, that's coming later. Okay. Ruchmana Rice argues that the sages were in conflict regarding the fact that Vashti fights for her modesty and her honor. This goes back to Ben's question, while our heroine Esther is willing to work through the bedroom. In the same vein, writer Amy Hirschberg proposed last year that Vashti be promoted as a heroine for those Jewish women who find themselves in abusive relationship. How about modern day lessons? Rabbi Susan Grossman mused on whether Hillary Clinton could be seen as a modern day Vashti. She's the first woman in the Bible who refused to be objectified as a sex object instead of naming such behavior as inappropriate. Hillary is like Vashti in this way. Marjorie Garber of Harvard draws the connection with Monica Lewinsky. Hillary is Vashti, the headstrong proto-feminist queen, and Monica, needless to say, is Esther, the beautiful Jewess. Here we have, and so this is what I was going to say earlier. It's not limited to merely the liberal branches of Judaism. Here is Wendy Amselem. She writes that Esther finds herself in the middle of a crisis. She is caught between conflicting obediences to her foster father and her husband. In addition, to come before the king unsummoned is an abnegation of her role as Vashti's replacement. She was chosen to be the queen since she represented the antithesis of Vashti's persona. I don't know what the criticism there that the author is going for. The Amselem article seems really on point. Amselem does give Esther credit for her strategy, but the secret of her success is having learned from the woman she replaced. In order to triumph, Esther must confront the image of Vashti and incorporate or perhaps discover the attributes of Vashti herself. I think it's actually quite lovely interpretation. It's really not presented favorably. Basically, the lesson is we have to learn, she has to adopt Vashti's self-respect. She has to learn how to take an attribute that is clearly not experienced amongst her and her uncle, and she has to learn to stand up for herself. And so on one hand, she has to both affirm her Jewish identity, and on the other hand, adopt maybe some of the characteristics of Vashti that she has never been taught within the Jewish context in order to save the Jewish people. And I actually think that's quite lovely. And I think that's often the message that I've been giving around Purim, and I'll end with here, which is that I think it's relevant in terms of COVID, but it's also relevant in terms of a lot of things. The traits that, just think about where you are right now in your life, and all the different obstacles you had to go to get to where you are, to get to your station, to get to your profession, your job, wherever you might be in life. When you arrived at that spot, all of the different toolkits that you used might not be super beneficial once you get there. And I think what we're seeing is that when we don't have power, maybe the Mordechai approach, the conniving approach, the nefarious approach, that's okay. But once we have this power, she has to learn how to act differently. And I think now we have to learn as a community. I've been saying we've operated for 100 years in COVID, and now I think we're figuring out is how do we continue to validate what we've done in the past while understanding that what had supported our congregation over the previous 100 years might be different from going forward. And that's me, by the way. I'm speaking what validated me in terms of being able to come to Beth Sholom and be the senior rabbi here. I don't think that those are necessarily the skills that are going to allow me to flourish in this role. It requires learning new skills and learning more about myself and adopting things that might be foreign to me to begin with. So that's my little Devar Torah that I want to conclude with.
Hey, yeah. I have a weird, when you mentioned learning from the past, is there any way we can connect this to the Shtei Luchot and say the first tablets were destroyed and we came back a second time and we learned something from the mistakes made then? And or is that way out there?
Well, the Luchot are the same. So my homiletical approach around the Luchot is that this is totally homiletical. This is me. My homiletical approach around this, and then I'm going to hit pause, is we're given these 10 commandments. We don't like them. They get thrown apart, but the commandments don't change. We change. And so we get the second set of commandments. They are the same as the first set of commandments, but we have changed that now we are willing to accept them. That doesn't quite work with yours, though.
Well, maybe Vashti and Esther did have the same basis to work, but seeing how it failed the first time, there was changed in the way she reacted to those same instructions or same situation.
I like that.
And did Esther know Vashti's story?
Must have. I mean, why else would there be
the eunuchs told her?
Yeah, well, also Mordechai. Mordechai, I got this scheme. Let me tell you what happened. I always imagine. So with that, thank you for engaging with this. The rest of the article is really interesting. It gets into the slaughtering at the end and our discomfort with that. I think sits at the heart of this is two elements. One is our comfort with success and being on top, versus our comfort losing the wars. Maybe we're more happy to lose the wars. And then the other part that I just wanted to emphasize is adoption and changing and coming out with who you are. And I think so much of Judaism, at least the Judaism that I grew up with, was just like keep who you are to yourself, fit in, look the right way, bow at the right time. And unfortunately, that was the Judaism that I grew up in, but that's not the Judaism in this text. The Judaism in this text is like, you can only save the people by being who you and only you are. Like that's it's so obvious that that's the lesson, that it's a shame that it's often not communicated in that way. So thank you all for participating in this conversation. I wish you all a Chag Sameach. I hope to see some of you tomorrow to pick up your bags. And then we've got lots of fun events tomorrow night. We've got a game show, we've got a Megillah reading, and then we'll be reading the Megillah during Minyan on Friday morning as well. So I just want to wish all of you a Chag Sameach. What's the cat's name?
Luna.
What?
Luna.
Yoda.
Luna.
Oh, Luna. Okay. Well, bye-bye, Luna. Take care, everyone. And I wish you all a Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. Take care, Sandy. Bye-bye.